Welcome to the Alchemy for Authors podcast. I'm your host, Jo Buer. If you're an author, aspiring author, writer, or wordsmith, you're in the right place. Join me as I chat with authors and industry professionals and share my own experiences with using manifestation and mindset practices to supercharge our writing lives. We'll explore ways to overcome writer's block and imposter syndrome. We'll find motivation and inspiration to get our butts in the chair and our stories written. And most importantly, we'll embark on creating lives and livings doing what we love. If you've ever dreamed of a prolific, wealthy, happy or healthy author career or writing practice, then this show is for you. So let's dive into Alchemy for Authors. Hello, my friends. Thanks for joining me again for another wonderful episode of Alchemy for Authors. Episode 53, in fact, where I get to chat to repeat guest and one of my favourite people, Emma Dhesi. So if you've been listening to this podcast from the beginning, you'll remember Emma from episode 4, where she talked about banishing imposter syndrome. This episode is a little bit different. To celebrate the release of Emma's first nonfiction book, Launchpad, The Countdown to Writing Your Book, we'll be talking about all things, as you can probably guess, about writing a book, from the physical craft of conjuring an amazing story to advice, tips, and tricks for researching, choosing a style guide, and working with a book coach, for example. I'm by no means at the stage in my career an expert at writing books, but between having studied creative writing, teaching it, and of course actually doing it, I'm not a complete newbie either. But there are things in Emma's book, Launchpad, that have been absolute game changers for me. Simple things, but things that I just hadn't thought about. And so I'm really highly recommending that wherever you are in your writing journey, you check out the links in the show notes after this episode and go purchase a copy for yourself. You are not going to be disappointed. It is one of those writing reference books that you're going to want living on your desk. Now, some of the other fun things that we discuss in this episode are how turning 40 was the catalyst to get Emma to write her first novel, the serendipitous circumstances that led Emma to become one of the lead authors for Launchpad, the value of investing in a book coach, and why book coaches are not some newfangled fad, how so many authors get the concept of character flaws wrong, and how writing a book can have a positive effect in all areas of your life, and I can most certainly vouch on that. So if you're as excited as I am to dive in and hear again from Emma Dhesi, go grab a drink, find a comfy chair, sit back and enjoy the show. Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to another episode of Alchemy for Authors. Today I am chatting with novelist and book coach Emma Dhesi. Emma's first novel was The Day She Came Home, published in 2019. Since then, she's published a further 2 novels, most recently More Than Enough. Emma writes dark suspense novels about women in challenging situations, all with a secret to hide. Her first psychological thriller, Follow Me, is due out later this year. Her first non-fiction book, Launchpad, The Countdown to Writing Your Book, was published recently in 2023. Emma has appeared on the Overflowing Bookshelves and Writing Away with Kelly podcast, as well as appearing way back on episode 4 of Alchemy for Authors. She lives in Edinburgh, Scotland, with her husband, 3 children, and 3 cats. So welcome, Emma. It is so wonderful to have you back on the show.
Oh, thank you, Jo. It's so good to be here. It's lovely to see you again.
I know. I was looking back and it's been almost exactly a year since we chatted last on the podcast, which was really cool. Really cool.
So that might mean it was 2 years ago then that maybe we first met, because I remember you were on my show as well, and that was maybe in the bit before. So it's been a wee while we've known each other.
I know, and time just goes so fast. This is crazy, but it's so amazing seeing the fantastic things that you're doing and kind of growing in your author career and everything. And so one of those things that I really want to talk about today is your new book, Launchpad, The Countdown to Writing Your Book. which is out in the world. And you normally write fiction, and here you are putting together a non-fiction book. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that even came about.
Yeah, of course. So I've always known I wanted to put a non-fiction together. Well, since I sort of entered the writing space, I've known that I wanted to do that. And I've been waiting for the right topic and waiting for just the right moment to kind of delve into that. And I was given an anthology by my mum at Christmas, I think it was, Christmas before last. It was a beautiful anthology on how to write. And it covered different aspects of craft and the writing life more generally as well. And lots of contributing authors to it. And they all brought their own unique voice and their own unique experiences. So some were very much genre fiction writers, others were literary, some were poets. The anthology also included, illustrators as well. So it was a real mix of different types of creatives. And I really appreciated all those different voices coming in. And obviously, some resonated with me more than others. And the reason I mention that is because I think about 2 weeks after finishing that anthology, my friend Grace Salmon emails me and said, "Hey, I want to put this anthology together on how to write. Do you want to come in and be a lead author with me?" And I just thought, oh, that's serendipity. That's kind of like the universe saying to me, now is the time to dip your toe in that water. So I jumped on board that project. And when I was asking Grace, what prompted you to want to do this? She has a podcast, or she calls it a radio show in the States, which is called Launchpad. And it's really lovely, actually, because especially with lockdown, a lot of authors missed out on the opportunity to do their book tours and to let the world know about their books. So she wanted to put together this show that would let writers who had a new book come out over that period of time, a way of kind of sharing with the world about their new book and telling people about it. And through conversations there, she had this idea, well, why don't I take this a step further and help writers write their books as well? So it was a lovely project to be involved in because, as novelists, we're often on our own, aren't we? We can chat about things, but when it comes to the writing, we're very much on our own. Doing this anthology was great because I got to reach out to the people that I knew I wanted to work with and who I've been around in their space for a while. And I knew that they would be the really good people to ask to be part of this. And also selfishly, I got to sort of include all of the topics that I would want to know if I was back at the beginning, starting again, or, if my career needed just a little bit of a boost. Because we all get to a point, I think, where we feel like maybe we've plateaued a little bit. So it was also a great way for someone who just needs that re-injection into their writing life. It would help them get their motivation back as well. So it was through a few people that this came to be, but it just was so fortuitous. Serendipity called, the universe called and said, let's do this. It's going to be a fun project. So I like it when people bring things to me and I get to go, yeah, that sounds fun. Let's do it.
Really is amazing how that happens. And that happens so often, I think, for all creatives, really, is that you get that burst of inspiration that, ooh, this is interesting. And then something will just fall into your lap or into your inbox or just to make it a reality, which is really cool. That's really cool.
It is really cool. It's lovely. And suddenly you're kind of open to it as well. As I hadn't read that other anthology, then I'm sure I might have let that opportunity pass or not grabbed it and said, yes, let's do this.
Yeah. Now, so who do you think this book is best suited for? Like, is it somebody that has written a book or is just starting out and wanting to dip their toes in? Like, who is this, do you think, best suited for?
So I think it is best suited for someone who has been writing for a little while. They've maybe not written their first novel yet, but they've been on that road to it. So there's probably a few half-finished manuscripts in a drawer somewhere. So they've got some experience and they know the sort of basics of what's required to write a novel. But in the book, I did want to make sure that we covered all the fundamentals, if you like, putting in the foundations for a good story. And that includes the things that go on around the story as well. So, for example, we look at doing research tools, and which is great, not just for historical or kind of procedural books, but even contemporary books, if you're writing a story that's set in another city, you might want to have a little look around and see what's that city like, what can you learn about that city, or if it's another country altogether, then you definitely want to do some research, particularly if you've not been there or you've not been there for a while. So Meredith Stoddard was great. She's not a librarian, but she should be, because she has all these research tools. She just knows how to not just, go on Google, but actually how to use lots of Google tools as well. So like Google Maps, Street View, but then also how do you search? What are the terms that you put into search, and to narrow your search and get specific results that you're looking for? So that's, on a practical level, that was so useful. And then she also does a little bit of a dive into, what does she call it? Having good sources. So verifying your sources and making sure that you're not sort of feeding in wrong information into your book, basically. And then I've got a chapter about working with a book coach and how that is a part of your research and a part of your team, and will ultimately help you write a better book. So there's little things like that, critique groups as well. So the stuff that goes on around the actual writing. And then in terms of craft, we look at it all, really. We look at story structure, vital. We look at scene structure, which I have a personal, I love scene structure. It just transforms my writing. Look at character. We look at point of view. We look at how to create, world building and creating a great setting for your world. We have a fabulous chapter on show and tell.
Yeah.
Which I hope, it's brilliant. I just hope that this will, for our readers, will just put to bed that whole kind of confusion around show, don't tell, which is a bit of a misnomer. What else have we got? Oh, there was a good one, how to add suspense to your story. So this is great too, not just if you're writing thriller or crime, but every story needs a level of suspense. It needs that conflict in there, because that's what keeps it interesting and keeps things moving forward. So Samantha Scannell came in to do that chapter. And there's another one that's gone out of my head now, but I know that it's a really good chapter. But it's, the other one that I insisted that we have, and this was where I got to be very selfish, is I don't have the best eye for detail. Grammar and spelling are not my wheelhouse. And so I wanted there to be a chapter in there that was about the key things that a novelist needs if they're going to write. So I don't need a book. I don't need to go to Strunk and White and have a whole book on it. I just need a chapter that's going to give me what I need. And so Stacey Juba, she's an author as well as an editor, she put together a chapter on the 10 main things that fiction writers need to know about and how to do it properly, basically. And I tell you, as soon as she submitted that chapter, I've been looking at it a lot, using it on a regular basis. I just find it so useful. And she's even incorporated some differentiations between the American styles and the British styles. Can't remember what you use in New Zealand and Australia. Do you use an American style or your own one?
No. So I like to be difficult. Most of my books are in British English, because in New Zealand, we tend to go with the British or UK English, except for my most recent book that will be out later on this year, where I'm like, oh, this is going to be based in America and it's going to be American English. So that was an interesting change, because I was having to do a lot of research as to, we call things different words in that as well. So it's not just the spelling of the words, but things that we say here in New Zealand or phrases even are just never said in America.
I was listening to someone talk about that, and, depending on which state you're saying it in, then they use different words for the same thing as well. Like soda, pop, coke.
Yes.
All that kind of thing.
Yeah. See, here in New Zealand, even that. Here in New Zealand, we say, most often we're like, fizzy drinks is what we'd kind of call them. And then I lived in Canada for several years, and it was pop. And Canada still has that UK English, British English, like for spelling and things like that. But we're still worlds apart with a lot of our words and things like that. And so then I made the jump to US and, did all the Googling. I had in my mind a setting and a place. And I've had just a bit of a dive into your Launchpad book, and it is brilliant. Like, even just one of the first chapters being exactly what you said about how to research and, using Google and that, there were just little tweaks that to help with your search that I'm like, how did I not know this? Like when I'm searching something, I'm literally just typing in, words in there. I'm not thinking about different punctuation that you can use to find synonyms or, yeah.
Even like searching specific websites as well from Google. I'm trying to remember now off the top of my head, there's the pipe.
Yes.
That changes things as well. And who knew? Who knew?
I know. So there's just these little things too that were just so, so useful to me. And what I like about your book too is that the chapters are relatively short. I haven't been all the way through it, but I've, halfway through. The chapters are quite short. They're easy read. And then you've got the 10 tips or kind of a summary at the end of each chapter too. So can you
that was
about that?
Yeah, that was Grace's brainchild. So I think it's a great idea as well. Just so at the end of each chapter, there's each contributor's top 10 countdown of what they think is what you should go and do now that you've read the chapter. Because we wanted to give some practical steps for readers to take so that I'm sure you know this yourself. I certainly do this. I read a book, particularly a craft book, and I think I've taken it all in. And then I get on with my day and kind of forget about a lot of it as well. And I don't consciously implement what it is I've been learning into the next piece that I'm writing. So we wanted to make sure that there was something very tangible, very practical that readers could then use it and go and implement what they have just learned. So my kind of recommendation to people would be, if you know that there is a part of your craft that you want to improve upon, go to that chapter, read it. I recommend then reading it again and then going through those top 10 and just implementing them in small scenes or in a current work in progress that you've got. You can start practicing it so that you begin to make it second nature, that you embody it and you don't have to think about it so often when you go on to write your next piece. And then when you feel you've kind of got that, so you can move on to the next thing that you want to improve upon. Because there's always something. And I've certainly learned from my own experience that, I got a base level of competency with writing craft. And now at different elements of the craft is when I get to upgrade and up level. So it's not all going to happen at once, but I need to go in and be intentional about what it is I want to learn now and improve on now. And I think this book will really help people do that, particularly with those top 10 countdowns.
Yeah. I really do think, though, that it is a book that you do need to read cover to cover. Even if you think you know everything there is to know about a certain topic, like there is just some absolute gems in there. So good.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about bringing in the contributing authors is because they've all got different perspectives on things. They've all learned from other people and they're bringing their experience and what they've learned to the page here in this book. And so there are always going to be people that you resonate with and they'll help you see things in a different way. I do love craft books, but when they are written by the one person, then you're only getting that one perspective. And it's nice to have variety and have somebody explain things in a way that you might not have heard before and helps you see things in just with a fresh eye, I guess.
Yeah, I really like that. Something else that really intrigued me about this book that I thought was so cleverly done is I think in the introduction, you've said something about how each chapter, each contributing author has written it using the style guide of their choice. So it's not all, the Chicago style guide, or it's not all formatted in that same way with punctuation and everything like that. So I personally love that. I absolutely love that. But what made you decide to go with that?
We did and ahh about this quite a bit. We sort of went to and fro with it because we were thinking, well, we've got a chapter in here that is giving some guidelines on how to format a page, but the different chapters are done differently. In the end, we decided to let that contributor have the way that they do things and just let that be an example that there are different ways of doing things, that even within America, there's lots of different types of style guides. Yeah. Britain has its own. I would imagine as well that Australia and New Zealand have their own. Canada's got theirs.
Yeah.
So every country will have a variety of them. And Stacey's one is based on the Chicago Manual of Style, but she has adapted hers over the years to kind of fit what works for her and for her clients. And she's brought that to our book. And that's what she shares in her chapter. But, when I was asking her about it, she said the key thing is just to be consistent, and whatever style you opt for, there's no right or wrong exactly, but just make sure that you are consistent with how you do it, particularly in one piece of writing. So if you adopt one style in chapter 1, make sure it's continuous. So she would give examples of the ellipses, when do you put the spaces, when do you not? Using dash, is it a dash, an M dash?
Yeah.
All of those little things. So nothing is set in stone, but just consistency is the key. So we thought it was a nice way of just letting the contributors share their voice and express the way that they like to do it, and sort of being a good example to people that we've given you this guide, and it's a very good, clear guide. But if you find that you tweak things a little bit as you become more experienced and find your preferences, that is okay too.
Excellent. Oh, I love that. I just love that diversity. Yeah, I just think that is so wonderful. Absolutely. So, as a book coach yourself, was there a part of this book, reading other contributing authors' pieces and that was a real aha moment for you that has helped you with your own writing as well, or given you something that you can bring to your own clients? Was there something that stood out?
And nothing really stood out, I have to admit, but I did notice that because some of our writers are very, very experienced, and still there were things that perhaps I would change. It's difficult to kind of compare it to, say, the coaching that I do which is with fiction writers.
Yeah.
It's not absolutely comparable. But one thing I did notice, again, around the sort of style that people brought to it, was some people, probably me in this way, were very kind of factual, maybe a bit more journalistic perhaps in putting out the facts. But then other people were much more memoirish in how they wrote, much more casual and relaxed and friendly, I would say, or informal is perhaps a good word. So just seeing how different people come to nonfiction, and how even within that's very varied as well, just as varied as our fiction is, and how people explain things is interesting too. And I could tell who were teachers and who were not. There are a few of our authors who have been teachers in a past life, and you can see from the way that they explain things that they are very practiced in explaining things to an audience and being very clear about the way they articulate things, both on the page as well as in person as well. So that was really interesting. But because it wasn't storytelling and we weren't delving into character and that kind of thing, then I wasn't able to make that kind of comparison. But it was nice to know that other people need help just as much as I do, just as much as my first time writers do. It's always reassuring to know that no matter what level you get to, there's always a little bit of room for improvement, and we always keep learning.
That's right. There's always so much to learn on this journey. It's fantastic. It's one of the things that I love about writing.
Being a creative is a joy. There's no upper limit. If you are someone who is a lifelong learner, who enjoys that kind of gentle challenge, then I think this is a great profession to be in.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And so again, going back to the fact that you are a book coach and you coach authors, and that you've got a chapter in this book that specifically deals with that, and who might need a book coach and what a book coach does. And that, can you, without giving away everything in the book, but can you summarize a little bit about that? Who might need a book coach? Who might need to go a step further than just reading Launchpad and maybe have, a book coach as well?
I think everybody.
Yeah.
But I would say that.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe not everybody, actually. In fairness, there are, I think if you're right at the beginning and you're just sort of maybe in the first year or two of writing and you're still learning a lot of the basics and still piecing together maybe kind of short stories, learning to write scenes, that kind of thing, this is probably not the best investment for you, because it certainly is an investment of time and money. So in those early days, I think doing the online courses, doing weekend workshops, something at your local college, I think those are really great, so useful, not just for your learning those basic kind of craft elements, but also starting to build a little community of fellow writers as well. So if you can get out and into in with people at the beginning, that's always a great thing to do too. But I really do think that, and I wish I'd known about coaching when I first started writing my first novel, I think it is something that everybody can benefit from. I know you work with an editor, and your editor does developmental and helps you work kind of through your stories as well. And that was my experience with my editors to start off with. But when I switched over to working with a coach, I have to say it was really, really different, because the coach was coming in and working through the manuscript with me, not at the end when I'd written it and made it the best I could be. And then they got to come in and say, okay, this is working or this is not. But actually with my coach, she was there at the beginning with me, and we worked through it chapter by chapter by chapter. And having someone there, not just for the moral support, but I have to say that was hugely an enjoyable part of the process, was kind of sharing that. But also the craft level too, you know, when they're asking, because they're professionals, so when they're asking pertinent questions and understanding what's missing and prompting me as the creator to come up with the ideas and problem solve and deepen my characters as well, by default, you then up level your skill and your craft. So I do honestly think that if you are writing, if you know that you're writing a novel and it's maybe your first or second, I think this is invaluable. You will learn so much more. You'll fast track everything that you would take 10 years to learn by going to all of those classes. So by all means, do those classes at the beginning. But I do think there's a lot to be said for working one-on-one with someone. And if you've worked with a coach in any other area of your life, you'll know the benefits of having them. So, but I would say, just to kind of put it into context, coaching into context, it's something that has been there from day one. This isn't a new-fangled profession that's just been made up. It has always been there, but it was within the remit of an agent or within the remit of an in-house editor. So someone I always cite is V.S. Naipaul, who was, I read the biography of his editor, Diana Athill, and it's a book called Step. And she talks about how she discovered this young V.S. Naipaul when he was a new writer and he was still learning a lot. And he was, you know, she would say he was fuzzy around the edges. He wasn't yet the master storyteller that he became. But she was a guiding light in that and helping to shape him and helping to keep him going. I think he was quite difficult to work with as well. So just managing that element of him too, which amused me. But it's without having somebody by his side, he possibly wouldn't have become the writer that he became. So back in, this would have been the 50s, I think it was, the publishing industry and the publishing landscape was very, very different. As everything was, life was slower. There was more space. There was no email to make sure we had to do everything immediately. And also budgets were bigger. You know, there was more money around at that time for the arts. And so agents and editors had this, they had the space and they had the margins with which to nurture somebody new that they believed in and thought had real potential. That just doesn't happen anymore. Everything has sped up exponentially, and the majority of agents, the majority of editors do not work with their writers that way. And that's why publishing houses now, they know they're not going to get a perfect product that comes to them from, well, particularly from a debut novelist, but by any writer, but they're looking for as close to that as they can possibly get. So for those of your listeners who do want to traditionally publish, just know that when you do get your agent and you do sell the book to a publisher, there will be more work to do. So just know that. But that role of doing that nurturing is no longer there, and giving you that space and giving you 2 or 3 years to come up with this new novel and maybe ditch a novel and start a new one. That's not always there. You're very lucky if you do get that. And so that role that was once held by editors and agents has now moved into the kind of independent consulting sphere, if you like. And that's happened as well because a lot of in-house editors that have, you know, they've been made redundant and they've had to go freelance. And so they're looking for new ways that they can use their existing skills and still stay within that profession. So all that to say, it's not something new that's been made up. It has been around for a long time, but as the book industry has changed, like so many things, you can hire those services independently. So you and I know as indie authors, we can go and find someone to write our blurb for us, to do our ads for us, to do our book cover for us. to format the book for us. There's all of these services that are available if we don't have the time to learn how to do it ourselves,
Yeah.
or what's not in our wheelhouse. So I think it's vital. So whether you're indie and you know that you don't want to go down the traditional route, that you want to publish straight to Amazon or any of the others, you want to make your book the best it can be so that your readers love it, and they're the ones who are going to give you the 5-star reviews and say they really enjoyed it and tell their friends about it. That's why you want to kind of make sure that you're doing the best that you can. If you are going the traditional route, then for the reasons I've stated above, you want to make sure that this is the best product that you can create, because with each book you write, you get one shot. So
Yeah.
you
That's
want to
right.
make it count.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And I think we're so lucky that just in the day and age that we live in, book coaches and people that can help us in all those different realms are so much more accessible, which is really cool. We don't have to hunt far or search far to find somebody who really knows what they're doing, which is really great. Yeah.
Yay. And I'd say that every coach I know loves books, loves story, loves working with authors. We are lucky to be doing what we love.
Yeah.
It's not just to pay the bills. It's not because it's a job that enables us to do other things, but actually it's a passion. It's something that we all really enjoy and we care about. And so if you are writing fantasy, you will be able to find a coach who works specifically with fantasy writers,
Yeah.
because that's the genre that they love and understand. You'll find others who work with literary writers or with thriller writers, with young adult and children's as well, even children's picture books. There are people to help you because that's, I think,
A whole
harder than
different
people
thing.
might imagine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So there's a real plethora of different coaches out there, and I work across genres, and I work with first-time novelists. It's one of my visions, and my mission is to help 1,000 authors write their first book. So I work across genres as long as it's your first story. But then there are other coaches. So if you're listening and you're like, well, I'm 3 or 4 books in, how can someone help me? You maybe feel that you've reached a level or a plateau. There are coaches who specifically want to work with writers who are more experienced and further down the line, so that they can boost that author's chances of, hitting the bestseller list, not just publishing your book, but getting a book that's going to hit the bestsellers. And their level of experience is beyond mine, it has to be said. So they are working with, and they've usually had, they've worked in the publishing industry before, they've then become a coach. So there is someone for everybody at all levels. And nonfiction as well. I don't know if you have nonfiction listeners, but there is lots of people out there who will help you write either a memoir, or if you've got a business and you're looking to write a business book or a how-to book, there are people who can help you do that as well.
So amazing. That's so great. That's so great. And so with your first-time authors that you work with, is there like a commonality of what their biggest struggle is, or the thing that they're struggling the most with when they come to you?
Yes, there is. So I'd say the biggest, I'll be honest here and say, people come to me when they've hit a brick wall. I know I'm often a last resort for people. They've been going around in circles with the same story, sometimes for decades, and they just want it done now.
Yeah.
This is something that has to be done. And so what I find is with a lot of people, they've got some amazing ideas, but there's a lot of ideas because they've been thinking about it so intensely for the last however many years. And so a big part of my job with them is to kind of weed out what's not needed and what is needed, what's really working well in the plot line, what can we take out? So something I might see is that there are like 3 or 4 subplots, and only one of them actually adds anything to the story. So it's about kind of, okay, how do we either take those out or amalgamate them? And so it fits in with the story, and they've not just been added in to make the story more complex. Sometimes there's too many characters, and, the writer loves all of the characters and wants to keep them all in. But we might find actually that 2 or 3 characters are playing the same role. And so you can amalgamate them or remove 1 or 2 of those. So character can be a big one as well. Characters, I think what newer writers struggle with the most is the character flaw. And it is a hard one, I think, to kind of get to grips with at the beginning. it's not about having a short temper or a short attention span or being a bit grumpy in the mornings. That's not the kind of flaw that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But we're talking about a flaw about how they see the world and what their past experiences have taught them about the world, and now how they move about and act in that world that is not serving them, that is not helping them get what it is that they want or what they need. And that is quite a big missing component, I think, to newer writers and what they're trying to do with their book. And if we can get under the hood of that and investigate, well, what is wrong with the way that they're seeing the world? How is it impacting them? How did it start? How did they get that view of the world? And then how do we want to change that over the course of the book? Because that's what the book is about. Any novel is not about the plot points. It's about how that character changes from the beginning to the end. And we want to see that evolution on the page. So the character development is certainly one thing that I would say that every writer, actually not just new writers, but every writer needs help with. And the more experienced and skillful you get, the more nuanced you can become with that character development. Yeah. And then in terms of plot, so yeah, as I was saying, just sometimes too many things are going on. I sometimes see what we would call plot convenience. So a character gets in a tricky situation and the author panics and thinks, oh my God, okay, let's just throw in this and see what, and move them on. And it doesn't serve their story at all. By contrast, the other thing that I see very often is that nothing happens. You've got a number of scenes where characters are sitting and thinking, or they might have a little chit chat about something, but there's no action in the story. And when I say action, I mean there's no conflict. But he's having a difficult time. Everything's moving along nicely. And often this is because people love their characters and they don't want to put their characters in difficult situations. So I get that quite a lot. So then I've got to encourage the writer to, you got to get mean. Start being a character so that they can have this lovely ending where they redeem themselves and the world is put to rights again. So those are some of the most common things that I see in newer writers. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I think that evolution of character is, a really big one. So you have got, and it kind of relates to this, I guess, but there's an evolution of the author as well when we write a book. And you wrote a beautiful quote, I think, at the beginning of Launchpad, which is writing a novel is not just about the words on the page, but about who you become in the process. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that is just magic. I love that.
Well, my little bit of alchemy for the podcast.
Yeah, well, there we are.
It's so true. When I started writing all those years ago now, and I was thinking about writing this first book, I was focused very much on the plot. It's all about the plot. I've got to get the plot down. I've got to move this character from A to B to C. What I didn't realize was that at the same time, I was moving myself from A to B to C. I'm someone who had always said to themselves, you're not a finisher. You'll never manage to do this. If you were meant to be a writer, you would have done it in your 20s. If you were meant to be a writer, this would be really easy. If you were a writer, you'd stop giving yourself excuses not to do it. So I had all these things going on in my head. And when the first sort of challenge that I gave to myself, I got to 40 and I was like, Emma, you've got this itch again. We've been through this a million times. You either write this darned story or let it go, move on. So I made the decision, okay, I'm going to write a first draft. Doesn't matter how bad it is, but for the first time in my life, I'm going to get to the end of the story. And then I can go from there and see, did I enjoy that process like I hoped I would? Or was it painful and horrible and I never want to go through it again? So I discovered I actually did enjoy the pain and I enjoyed the puzzling and putting the pieces together. It did something to my brain and it gave me a lot of joy. So then the next challenge was, okay, let's revise this and see where we can go from here. And then that's when I started thinking, well, okay, maybe I could publish this at some stage. But when I look back at that, I see that was an evolution of taking things one step at a time, from the very basics of doing one scene at a time, one conversation that my characters have, and then one draft at a time. And now that I'm further along, it's one book at a time. And what happened for me was when I finished that book, that first draft, it was like, wow, I can do it. If I can, if I can finish this draft, if I can complete something and sort of commit to myself, and because it took me a long time to write it, I had 3 preschool kids at that time, so it took a long time. But if I can commit to something for that length of time and still be engaged in it and still be, excited by it, then what else can I do? And that then started to open up other things. Okay, so if I can write this first draft, can I revise it? Yes, I can revise it. Okay, well, could I find an agent? Possibly. In the end, I decided no, but I can publish it. And that's what I want to do. So then, like we're doing now, it's like, well, okay, I've really enjoyed doing this. Can I write another one? Can I write another one? Can I write another one? Can I start a podcast? Would that be something I'd like to do? Could I chat to people on the other side of the world and learn from them? Could I then share what I've been learning all these years with other people who are sort of coming up behind me and pay it forward to them? And so, yes, it's just little bits, little bits, little bits. I never would be doing what I'm doing now. I never would have become an authorpreneur, as we call ourselves, if I hadn't written that first book. And funnily enough, it, for me, then rippled out into other areas of my life. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I just became more confident in myself. I was a woman in the second half of life, I wasn't a spring chicken anymore, but now I felt I had this new lease, kind of had this new focus, this new career that I could have. So it gave me a confidence that then rippled out into, even into my marriage, even into how I mothered my children, and feeling that confidence that, oh, I'm being a really good example to them, that if they, particularly to my daughters, that they can, if they're persistent and they're keen enough and they don't give up, then they can achieve what they want as well. And I take that now and I'm able to kind of pass that out into with my clients and with my students, and hope that they then get that confidence and they start to change how they see themselves as well. And then hopefully in the future, they too will pass it on to the next people coming up behind them. But it just changed my concept of who I was and what I was capable of. And that was massive for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally resonate with everything you said there, because it was exactly the same for me. Really, really life changing. And just being able to finish a big project like that. And there is no way I would have ever have had the confidence to start a podcast. This is completely out of my comfort zone. And had I not written my first book. And there really is something to be said about that sense of accomplishment for getting your words on paper, whether you publish it or not, but just having completed that can be really life altering for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if, listeners kind of, they write that book and then they do decide, actually, this wasn't what I wanted, I thought it was going to be, but it will give you that confidence to go in and try something else that might be the right thing.
So amazing. Thank you so much. I am hoping then that you can let our listeners know where they can find your books and find Launchpad, where they can grab that, and how they can connect with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Launchpad, if you go to emmadesi.com/launchpad, you'll find details there, because this is the first of 3 books. So Launchpad, the countdown to writing your book. The second one coming out in April is publishing your book. And then the third one will be about marketing your book. So there's lots of good stuff to come. But obviously it's also available in all the usual places online. And then if you want to connect with me, emmadesi.com is my website. I'm old school, so I'm still on Facebook. And you'll find me at Emma Desi Author there.
Wonderful. And just lastly too, like, what's next for you? You've gone from your fiction and you're doing this wonderful 3-book trilogy of nonfiction to help other authors. So what is next for you? What are you up to next?
So I do have my first thriller coming out later this year. It's at those final stages. I've just got to keep going with it. Because I've sometimes hit a plateau as well. And I think, oh, can I keep going? I'm fed up with this. So I've just got to keep going and get that out in the world. And then I have a new idea for a new novel, which I'm quite excited about. around plant medicine and what plant medicine can do and how I could incorporate that into a thriller. And then I'm also working on my own nonfiction book, not an anthology this time, but looking more at, rather than the craft of writing, I want to look at what goes on around the writing life and what's involved in order to get to that point where you feel emotionally resilient enough to actually write the book and let it be read by other people or put it out into the world. Because a lot of the blocks I see people struggling with basically are confidence levels and time management levels. And sometimes people can feel like that those are out of their control. And I want to help people see that they are within their control and they can take charge of those things. So that's coming up for later this year.
Oh, that's exciting. I can't wait to hear all about that one. We'll have to have you back on for that one because, that's important. That mindset and that, so important. Yeah. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It has been such a blast having you back and chatting with you and seeing where you're at a year after we last spoke. So this is really cool. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jo. Thank you.
Some takeaways from today's show. 1. Be intentional about what you want to learn and improve on and implement your new skills as you go until they become second nature. 2. When choosing a style guide for formatting your punctuation, for example, stay consistent. Consistency in your work is key. 3. No matter your experience with writing, there's always room for improvement and learning. 4. At the beginning of your writing career, invest in online courses and weekend workshops and learn the basics of craft and begin building your community of fellow writers. 5. Coaching is something everyone can benefit from. Whether you're writing your first novel or have a few under your belt already, it's invaluable whether you plan on publishing traditionally or independently. 6. A novel is not about the plot points, but how the character changes from the beginning of the story to the end. 7. Character flaw is not about a short temper or being grumpy in the morning. A character flaw determines how a character sees the world and what their past experiences have taught them about the world. 8. Don't be afraid to be mean to your character. Put them in difficult situations. It makes the ending of your story more impactful when they redeem themselves or save the world. 9. The sense of accomplishment that occurs from writing a book can create a ripple effect across all areas of your life. And 10. In Emma's words, writing a novel is not just about the words on the page, but about who you become in the process. So that was just so much fun chatting with Emma on the show again, and I hope you really enjoyed it too. I will be putting all the links in the show notes for you to check out Launchpad, the countdown to writing your book. And if you're maybe still on the fence about taking the leap and writing your first book, then consider visiting Emma's website, emmadesi.com, to find out how you can work with her. Emma's goal, as she mentioned in this episode, is to help 1,000 authors write their first book. Maybe you're one of them. On a different note, my friend, best-selling author and millionaire author coach, Carissa Andrews, has created a wonderful course bundle that I really didn't want you to miss out on. So this course bundle is for those of you who are maybe looking for more royalties, readers, or recognition of your work, and who are intent on wanting to create an abundant author career and dropping the struggling artist mindset and living more abundantly. Carissa is offering her Abundant Author Activation course, Millionaire Author Challenge, and her Abundant Author Alignment course as one amazing bundle. If you get in quick, you can get it for 50% off. Lifetime access, my friends, for 50% off, but only until May 15th, 2023. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that I stand by Carissa's courses. In fact, I invest in them myself. So if you believe your mindset impacts upon your success, then you need to go check them out. I will, of course, leave the link in the show notes, but do make sure you get in quick. 50% off is only until 15th of May. All right, my lovelies. So as usual, I am wishing you a wonderful, joyful, prolific, and of course, an abundant writing week ahead. Until next time, bye.